For the Sake of My Children, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel narrates the life story of an Australian girl who fell in love with a Saudi boy. Then she converted to Islam, married her Arab lover, and traveled with him to the Islamic world. This book is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on a true love affair between a former Christian girl and a Muslim immigrant. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 36. In Search of Her Kidnapped and Raped Daughter. After her successful speeches in Paris, the capital of France, the Australian mother, Irshad, decided to return to Afghanistan and search for her eldest daughter, Aisha, who had been kidnapped, raped, and imprisoned by Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. Then she called the babysitter of her 6 children in Canada and asked her to extend her stay at her apartment in Toronto. When the babysitter agreed to continue taking care of her children, Irshad decided to return to Kandahar in Afghanistan. She knew and understood that such a trip involved high risks and might expose her to terrorist attacks. Despite this, the brave Australian mother is no longer a persecuted Muslim, but rather a Christian who believes in God and knows that Afghanistan is not what it used to be. When she was living under persecution and violence, the country was controlled by the Taliban government and the Al-Qaeda group, while she was under the tyranny of her abusive Muslim husband. However, after the NATO forces entered the country and removed the Taliban government from power, a lot of changes happened. The mother Irshad decides to travel undercover and pretend to be a Muslima woman again. So, she flew straight from Paris to Kabul. When she arrived at the international airport of the Afghan capital city, the white Australian woman was wearing the abaya and the Islamic veil. Therefore, no one was able to identify her as a foreigner until she reached the hotel. As she travels from the airport to the hotel, she is stunned by the changes that have taken place during those years she has spent abroad. She could not believe her eyes when she saw women walking the streets without their husbands or muharram men accompanying one of them. Young girls with backpacks are heading to their schools. Some women walk without their faces hidden behind the humiliating Islamic burqa, which was compulsory attire for every woman under the Taliban reign of terror. The Australian woman was also stunned when she saw some Afghan Muslim men wearing Western clothes such as shirts and trousers. Despite this, the white foreign widow saw outdated that still held the people of Afghanistan in the ancient dark ages of the 7th century AD, at the time of the Arab prophet Muhammad. Some Muslim women cover their faces completely like eerie black ghosts, and some Afghan men still grow terrifyingly long beards and dress like the mujahideen she knows from her bitter experience. From Kabul, the Australian woman flew to Kandahar the next day. Once in that hellish city, the horribly abused Australian woman recalled the dark years she spent with those mujahideen barbarians and her cruel Arab Muslim husband, Mustafa. It was as if she was rewatching a scary horror movie all over again when her mind began to reproduce those horrific memories of her torture and abuse. She could still see the innocent Canadian Muslim girl, Scheherazade, as she lay dying under those stones and bricks that had been thrown over her tender body half buried in the hot earth when she was brutally stoned for her alleged adultery with her Syrian lover. She recalled her experience of being kidnapped and imprisoned in that tomb shrine for 2 days and her agonizing suffering with the head of the village of Sharaf al-Banat, the human beast who tried to rape her in his home. She recalled her unjust imprisonment for 12 months in a death concentration camp euphemistically called the Nawashis Women's Prison in Kandahar city. She could not believe she was able to survive in that dangerous prison. She knows that in that infernal city, she was subjected to many cases of abuse and violence, and her daughter was repeatedly raped by that evil old man, and she is still being abused and imprisoned until the present time. In her heart, she wished to find him and kill him with her own hands. She also remembered that this evil Muslim old man turned some of her children into slaves and beggars in the streets of Kandahar, and her daughters into slaves for his Afghan wives. The same city reminded her of her 2 sons who were kidnapped from her hands at gunpoint and turned into terrorists and killed in the jihad war for the sake of God. She understood that her husband, the Arab Muslim terrorist Mustafa, was responsible for all the suffering and abuse that she and their 7 children went through. He also participated in the cowardly terrorist attacks in the United States on September 11, 2001, which claimed the lives of 3,000 innocent Americans in one day. Memories of those dark years made the Australian widow, Ershad, wish to undergo brain surgery to erase her memory and get her out of it forever. She would pay any amount of money to any doctor if he could erase from her brain the horrific memories of those 10 years of abuse and oppression she spent in the Muslim world with her terrorist husband and those ruthless Islamic mujahideen. As soon as she arrived in Kandahar, the mother, Ershad, began searching for her daughter, Aisha, who was kidnapped and raped years ago. She wanted to look for a needle in a haystack. She returned to the place where the Mujahideen and their families used to live and train in the war of jihad for the sake of God against the so-called unclean infidels and the hypocritical and apostate Muslims. She remembered what had happened when she and her husband and their 7 children were stuffed like eggs in a carton or squashed like sardines in a small can in their filthy tent without windows and sanitary ventilation. Ershad found the place in ruins and not inhabited by any creatures, whether humans or animals. Even millions of vampire mosquitoes and billions of flies have migrated somewhere. Thus, from the first day of her search in Kandahar city, the Australian mother has given up hope of finding her lost daughter. She learned from some people that all the Afghan Taliban fighters and the Arab Mujahideen have fled Afghanistan and are now hiding in the Swat Valley in Pakistan. Some of them hide in the caves of Tora Bora in the Indian Caucasus region in the mountain range of eastern Afghanistan. The Australian widow, Ershad, knows that she will impose the death penalty on herself if she dares to travel to the strongholds of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda after the entire world learned that she had revealed the hiding place of the notorious white terrorist Sheikh Mohammed Noor al-Fransawi. Moreover, her controversial religious speeches against Islam, which she delivered publicly in the capital of France, would be another factor that would prove her apostasy from Islam and her return to Christianity. At first, the foreign mother, Ershad, decided to give up the idea of finding her kidnapped daughter, Aisha. But suddenly she remembered that Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid was living in his big mansion with his Afghan wives and their sons and daughters in the best neighborhood of the city. He used to come every morning to the camps of the Mujahideen, and he would return home late in the evening. Therefore, Ershad concluded that he was either still living in Kandahar with his many wives and offspring, or he had escaped during NATO airstrikes and strayed into the mountains or crossed the border and entered the Swat Valley in Pakistan. However, Ershad, the Australian mother, doubted that the aged mullah would be able to escape with so many of his families and children in such a brief time. She recalled how she, her 6 children, and many other families and their children had to flee the very day the deadly foreign airstrikes began. It took them several days to travel by animals and on foot to reach Pakistan. Mother Ershad's hope was revived when she came to this conclusion. Therefore, she decided to search for the evil old Muslim polygamist who loved to have sex with underage girls like her 10-year-old daughter in Kandahar city. She found the task too difficult for her alone to find someone in such a large and populous city. She decided to hire some people to do the research for her. Therefore, she went to the city center, found some unemployed Afghans, paid them a lot of money, and told them that she was looking for a married Muslim girl named Aisha Mustafa al-Shamari. She explained that the girl was married to Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. In Muslim countries, women retain their father's surname after marriage rather than adopting their husband's, which can be confusing for non-Muslims in Western nations. The mother, Ershad, promised to pay these hired workers more than 10 times what she gave them as an advance if they helped her find her daughter, Aisha Al-Shamari. While searching for the kidnapped and raped daughter, her Australian mother lives in a downtown hotel. She kept to herself most of the time inside her room. She does not want any of the Afghan people to recognize her, especially the women who knew her during her stay with them in the Mujahideen camps. After a week of intense searching, an Afghan hired female searcher came in with some information about her daughter. Although the name of the married woman found by the Afghani woman matched the name of her daughter, her husband's name was different. The wife's name is Aisha Al-Shamari, but her husband is known as Mullah Omar Bismillah, whose last name means in the name of God. This venerable Mullah Omar, in the name of God, is the Imam of the great mosque in the city center. The educated and intelligent Australian mother did not take another second to conclude that the wife was her daughter, Aisha, and that the husband, Omar Bismillah, or in the name of Allah, was Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid himself. It is understanding that after the Taliban were ousted from power, the wicked mullah changed his name to hide his identity as a former terrorist leader. If the new Afghan government finds out that he is one of the Taliban leaders who used to train the Mujahideen and send them to kill innocent people, he will be executed or sent behind bars for the rest of his life. The white foreign mother, Ershad, decided to confirm her conclusion before going to the Afghan police and revealing the identity of the evil old mullah. She understood that she would not be able to enter the house where the Afghan woman found her daughter Aisha without putting herself in danger. She knows that the evil terrorist man will do everything to prevent her from revealing his identity and put him in serious trouble with the new Afghan authority. First, Ershad decided to go to the Grand Mosque in downtown Kandahar and find out if Mullah Omar Bismillah is the same Muslim old man who kidnapped, raped, and still abused and imprisoned her daughter Aisha in the name of permissible child marriage in Islam. After that, the Australian mother, Ershad, took a taxi from the hotel to the biggest mosque. She knows that women are not allowed to enter the mosque, so Ershad waited outside until the worshippers had finished the noon prayer and left in droves. She stayed inside the taxi and continued to check out the Afghan Muslim men who were emerging from the mosque in large groups one after the other. After waiting for some time, the angry Australian mother saw that her sworn enemy, who betrayed the trust, kidnapped, and raped her minor child, who was 10 years old, was coming out of the mosque, followed by some bearded Afghans. These Muslim men do for him what no rational person would do, even with his God. Some of them kiss his hands, and some of them kneel and kiss the ground that his feet touch, and others drink the dirty water that he had used during his ablution to clean his hands, feet, face, head, mouth, and nose, and others carry his belongings. To this day, the Imam of the mosque, or the religious leader in Islam, is treated in the same way that the Prophet Muhammad was treated in his time, except that Muslims today do not seek blessings from his spit and urine as the companions of the Messenger of Allah Muhammad used to do with bodily waste after emptying his putrid waste such as urine, feces, and spit. The brave mother, Ershad, wished to have a weapon in her hands so that she could blow up Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid's forehead, where the prayer sign is located, which seemed to her like the sign of the beast 666 that mentioned in the book of Revelation of the Holy Bible about the Antichrist. Somehow, the Australian mother, who was gripped by righteous anger, managed to control her wrath and waited until the humanoid beast got into his car and his chauffeur drove him away. Immediately, Ershad asked the taxi driver to follow his car. The taxi drove behind the Imam's car without his knowledge. When his car arrived at his large house, the angry white woman waited until he got out of his car and entered. Then she quickly wrote down his address and asked her cab driver to take her to her hotel. Inside the room, she contemplated her next move before leaving her hotel again. Instead of going to Kandahar City Police Station, the white Australian foreign mother decided to take the matter up to NATO forces. Her experience with Muslim men in the Muslim world made her understand that the power of the Islamic police is more dangerous to society than any other government department. Instead of punishing her Arab husband, Mustafa, when he tried to kill her, the Saudi police let him go. Moreover, when the evil chief of Sharaf al-Banat village Sheikh Muhammad Ahmed tried to rape her inside his home, the Sharia court directed his heinous crime against her and sentenced her to 1 year in prison, releasing the rapist as a hero. Similarly, the Australian mother, Ershad, expected the same thing to happen if she filed her complaint against the kidnapper, rapist, and abuser of her daughter to the Afghan police. Deciding on her next step, Ershad changed her Islamic clothing, abaya and niqab, into a Western shirt and trousers. She pretended to be an Australian foreign reporter and walked towards a NATO checkpoint staffed by Canadian soldiers. After being thoroughly vetted, the white Australian reporter Ershad was allowed to enter the military premises. Once inside, she spoke to a senior military general and told him that she had come to reveal the hiding place of a dangerous former Mujahideen leader. The senior general took her complaint seriously and asked her to give a full report on how she knew about the terrorist leader and where he was now. When the brave Australian mother provided all the information required, an arrest warrant was issued for Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who is now known as Imam Omar Bismillah. That same evening, the imam of the city's largest mosque, Umar Satan Allah, was surprised when more than 30 foreign soldiers raided his house and arrested him. The arrest of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who became known as Imam Omar Bismillah, was one of the most important arrests that took place that year. The brave Australian woman learned that she deserves $50,000 in exchange for revealing the whereabouts of the terrorist leader, Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, who changed his identity and claimed that he was the Imam of the Grand Mosque, Sheikh Omar Bismillah. Afghan police have listed him as one of the most wanted terrorist leaders dead or alive in the country. Mullah Abu Hamid was unable to deny his identity, as Ershad's daughter was found in his home with the 3 children she had with him. Aisha is approaching the age of 19 when she is freed from the tyranny of that evil old man who started raping and assaulting her since the age of 10. For 9 years, she was kidnapped, raped, imprisoned, and repeatedly abused by this sinister old Muslim man. When the Australian mother, Ershad, saw her beloved daughter, Aisha, after many years of painful separation, she did not know whether to cry or rejoice. She could not believe her eyes when she saw her daughter coming out of the evil mullah's house with her 3 young children. She has 2 sons and 1 daughter from her kidnapper and abuser. Australian mother Ershad started crying when she realized that the old Afghan mullah's wives had reduced her daughter to the status of a maidservant. Ershad hugged her and started crying bitterly. Aisha recognizes her mother, Ershad, and starts crying too. She did not expect her Australian mother to come back to Afghanistan and look for her. The evil mullah has poisoned the mind of the little girl Aisha and made her believe that her mother left her with her siblings forever and fled to her motherland, Australia, the land of the Christian infidels, because she wants to marry a white man like her. Therefore, throughout these lean years, Aisha places the blame for her kidnapping, rape, persecution, pain, and torment of her and her siblings on her selfish Western mother, who abandoned her 7 children for the pleasures of this fleeting world. She did not know that her mother had returned to the Mujahideen camps and had obtained custody of her children. The mullah lied to her and told her that her 6 siblings were sent to the family of their late father Mustafa in Saudi Arabia because Islam forbids their adoption by him because he is not related to them by blood. In any case, on the same day, Mullah Abu Hamid was arrested, handcuffed, and dragged like a notorious criminal from his big house, and it happened that the Australian woman, Ershad al-Shamari, was with the military authority that arrested him. She defied all Western military restrictions and ran towards the kidnapper and rapist of her innocent child, Aisha, slapped him on the head, and then spit on his face. She also grabbed his long beard and began to pull it, then put her hands on his neck and proceeded to strangle him until the cowardly mullah cried for escape from the white demon foreign woman before she strangled him to death. Some NATO commandos quickly respond and catch the enraged Australian mother Ershad before she can kill the old goat. Despite being subdued and brought under control, The angry white woman kept cursing the evil mullah with all kinds of nasty Afghani words that suited him. Her righteous wrath was only calmed when the general in charge who led the arrest team assured her that the terrorist leader, Muhammad Abu Hamid, would never get out of prison. Either he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, or he will be tried, convicted, and hanged to death by an Afghan criminal court for his terrorist crimes. Chapter 37. Irshad determined to shout from the rooftops and expose the evils of Islam. After freeing her beloved firstborn daughter, Aisha, from the hands of her evil kidnapper and abuser, the Australian mother Irshad ran into serious trouble when she tried to get her daughter and her 3 grandchildren out of Afghanistan. Firstly, none of the 3 children has a birth certificate. Secondly, Aisha is a married girl who is over 18 years old, and therefore the Australian mother, Irshad, will not be able to sponsor her daughter to immigrate to Canada. Even if the Canadian Immigration Authority agreed to grant her entry to the country with her 3 young children, the process would still take at least 6 months or more. The Australian mother, Irshad Al-Shamari, knows that she will put her life in great danger if she stays for this long in Afghanistan. The Taliban terrorists will not let her live for a second if they know that it was she who led to the arrest of 2 of their senior leaders, Sheikh Mohammed Nur al-Fransawi and Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid, the Imam of the Grand Mosque in Kandahar city. Therefore, Irshad understood that she had to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible. However, she has no choice except to take her daughter and 3 grandchildren and go to a hiding place until she finds a way to take them to the West. Then the Australian woman paid large bribes to the passport office staff in Kandahar to obtain Afghan passports for her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Once the passports were issued, Irshad attempted to obtain visitor visas for her daughter and 3 children to the UK, but all their applications were refused. Irshad contacted 3 other European embassies and got the same refusal. She understood that the only Western foreign country that would accept her daughter and grandchildren was her native Australia. Aisha Mustafa Al-Shamari was born in Sydney City and is therefore entitled to Australian citizenship. However, her mother, Irshad, has no proof that her first daughter was born in Australia. The process of obtaining proof of her birth in Sydney can take several months. The only safe secular country in the Third World known to Irshad is India. So, the mother went to the Indian embassy in Kabul and applied for visitor visas. Embassy staff accepted their applications and granted them 6 months of visitor visas. Immediately, Irshad flew from Kabul to New Delhi with her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Fortunately, the Australian woman has a good knowledge of the Indian capital because she has been in that city for 1 year. She rented a 3-bedroom apartment and began the process of verifying the birthplace of her firstborn. During this process, she continued to hide her identity and pretended to be a Muslim woman. Meanwhile, Irshad hired a teacher to instruct her daughter and her grandchildren. Her daughter has not gone to school her whole life. She is 18 years old and still cannot read and write in any language in the world. Australian mother Irshad found another Indian teacher who agreed to teach Aisha and her 3 children English. Aisha can speak English, Arabic, and Afghani, but she cannot write or read in any of these 3 languages. Every day, the mother herself spends many hours teaching her illiterate daughter and grandchildren to read and write in English. Although Irshad loves her grandchildren and treats them as her own children, she still hates their Afghan terrorist father with bitterness. She told her daughter that when her children grow up, she must tell them that their damned wicked Muslim father died a long time ago. She does not want her grandchildren to have any connection with their abusive father to their innocent mother. Aisha recounted to her mother, Irshad, her bitter experience in marriage when she was 10 years old, and how she was abused and exploited by the senior wives of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid. How brutally the old mullah raped her as soon as their mother left them in his custody. It is very heartbreaking and painful to repeat what Aisha had to go through at the age of 10 at the hands of the evil and rude old man. She recounted how the mullah's wives hated her and often beat her because the old man showed more interest in her than his older wives. Whenever the mullah went out of the house, The wives forced her to do all the work in the large residence and even forced her to massage and bathe their bodies. She had to take care of the children of these Afghan women and her own young children as well. Even foreign housekeepers in Saudi Arabia and the Arab Gulf countries are not treated the way Aisha was abused by these Afghan women. The daughter confessed to her Australian mother that she had been raped several times by 3 of Mullah Muhammad Abu Hamid's sons. From time to time, someone would attack her when she was naked in the bathroom taking shower or using the toilet, or she was sleeping alone at night in her room, and he would rape her like a dog rape its bitch. Therefore, the daughter believed that 1 or 2 of her children were born because of incest. It took the Australian embassy 6 months to verify Aisha's place of birth before she and her 3 children were granted entry visas to the country. Before they traveled to Sydney, Australian mother Irshad took her daughter Aisha and her 3 grandchildren on a tour around New Delhi and visited the famous tourist site Taj Mahal in Agra City. The freed Australian woman did all she could in those 6 months to repair the damage and harm her daughter had been subjected to during those many years of enslavement and rape in the house of that evil mullah. Irshad then traveled with her daughter and grandchildren from New Delhi to Sydney. Shortly after their arrival in Australia, Susan Peterson entrusted the care of her liberated daughter, Aisha, and her 3 grandchildren to the care of her loving Christian parents. She opened a bank account for Aisha Mustafa Al-Shamari and transferred $5 million from her account to her daughter's account. Then she made a joint account for her daughter and her parents. She asked her parents to spend as much of this money as they wanted to educate and raise her daughter and grandchildren in the best viable way. Her parents agreed to take responsibility for the care of their granddaughter and great-grandchildren and to do everything they could to ensure their well-being and education. All 3 children have been sent to a private Christian academic school. As for Irshad, she wanted to spend the rest of her life with them, but she felt that God had called her to expose the evils that Islam had done to her, her daughter, and the rest of her children and grandchildren. She decided to never remain silent or follow any modern hoax theory that Western secular politicians called political correctness or fear anyone who might accuse her of a hate crime against Islam and the so-called religion of peace. She does not believe in Islamophobia and considers people's fear and hatred of Muslim terrorists and anti-woman teachings of Islam a natural feeling and should not be criminalized by any law. She believes that there are no more heinous crimes that one person can commit against another than what happened to her and her children and grandchildren. Therefore, the daring and brave Australian woman who had been horribly abused decided to go everywhere in the civilized Western world and scream from the rooftops and expose the evils of the hadiths of God's alleged Prophet Muhammad and the misogynistic teachings of the Quran. Accordingly, before she left Australia and headed to Canada where her other children are, Irshad swore before God Almighty that she would never rest or bow under any pressure until she made the entire world hear about her bitter experience with Islam. The first thing Irshad did was fly to Canada and then take her 6 children from Toronto and send them to her loving Christian parents in Sydney. She deposited a large amount of money in the joint account of her parents and asked them to take care of her 6 children as well. Upon her arrival in Canada, the Australian woman gave a speech at one of the most famous Canadian universities. It is called McMaster University, and it is in the city of Hamilton, Ontario Province. Muslim students, immigrant Muslim feminists, and some Canadian professors who support Islam and consider it a religion of peace and love interpreted her rhetoric as a hate crime against pacifists and may push the far-right group to verbally attack or kill them in public places, in their homes, schools, mosques, and workplaces. As a result, she was banned by the administration of McMaster University, expelled by the police in an undignified manner, and banned from entering the premises of that Canadian university for the rest of her life.